Armstrong is coming with an incredible rush. Is there any stopping Lance Armstrong?
We're here today to talk with Lance Armstrong, the legendary cyclist.
I've been investing really for most of my adult life, build out a great team.
If I had the same fearlessness now around asking for money back then, we'd have raised $1 billion.
Healthcare is here and here to stay.
We've really broadened the thesis of this fund.
I wouldn't change the lessons that I've learned.
I couldn't have gotten to this point without spending a lot of time working on myself.
Mental health, I think, needs to rebrand itself as mental fitness.
We will do whatever it takes.
The secret is that most people out there look at that and say, who wants to do that? And our answer is we do.
That's a pretty cool highlight reel. We do lots of highlight reels. Most of them don't look like that.
Everybody sends, it's funny, you do these things and people always send the sizzle reel and want an approval, and I'm like, I don't know, and it's fine.
Yes, you're very low maintenance, I have to say. You know, we've been interfacing with you and your team for a while. You're very, you're pretty relaxed about everything. I like that.
I laugh, because my family is here. Everybody should know my family's right here in the front row. So they would probably
I did hear chuckles as I said that.
They would beg to differ, but if I need a few things in life, and so long as they're in place, and then it's I'm more low maintenance. I wouldn't say I'm low maintenance. I'm complicated.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. So why don't we start with the path that took you into venture capital. Obviously, everyone knows about your cycling career. You had the highest highs, probably the lowest lows. How did you transition ultimately from that world into the world of investing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a two-part answer. One, I've always invested. Whether it's, just to back up, I've been a professional athlete for basically 40 years. So I always had income as a young guy and was able to invest, and so I was interested there. Along the way, I was able to angel invest, which I was super passionate about, identifying amazing founders, spaces that I believed in, and made some great angel deals. And then the other part, on the more specific to the venture side, is I've just been around venture for a long time. I was very involved with the founders of Austin Ventures. They were very involved in Livestrong, which was an organization most people know, an organization I started 25 years ago. And so I was watching them play the game, and then I was also fortunate enough to be an LP alongside some great GPs, primarily Lowercase Capital with Chris Sacca, Ignition Ventures, with Brad Silverberg, and so I loved watching them play the game, and so I just basically married the two, and it all came to fruition, and you saw a little bit of it in this reel through the shows, through creating content, building back this, relatively massive audience that really, for me, generated deal flow and created this flywheel.
Yeah. How do you handle the deal flow? Because I imagine for someone with your notoriety, it's coming from like a lot of different angles that the typical fund doesn't have access to.
I mean, I think access to great deal flow is the name of the game, right? And outside of events like this, obviously as GPs, we have to raise a fund, that's obvious. Once that's done, I think the most important thing is access to the best deal flow, the best founders. We will go any route that we need to, whether that's inbound, whether it's through the media channels, or outbound. We're certainly not afraid to hunt for deals, and if we hear about things, there are a variety of ways we can pursue the founder, but I think the good news is we almost always, if not always, get in the game, so to speak, and are able to have that initial conversation.
When you're evaluating a deal, how much of it is about the founders themselves? I mean, in venture, I feel like this is a very common thing, that it's so much about the management team. So for you, how much of it is about the management team? And do you feel like your experience in cycling gives you any kind of particular edge in identifying talent? And is there overlap between the characteristics you looked for in cycling compared to what you're doing?
Look, I think, just to touch on the first part of the question, I mean, I think my view of a founder or of a potential deal is different than Mel's view, my partner, or Jordan, my other partner's view of the deal. They would look at it from a different perspective. Ultimately, we think as a team, but we all have our own views. You're right. I mean, although we in cycling, there's not a locker room per se, but there's a team bus. That bus looks like a bus, but it feels like a locker room. So anytime you're in that locker room with a team, and it's also a professional sports team, so every year there are new, just like every other pro team, there are new players and old players go away, and so you're constantly trying to figure out the new players, how they fit in. And the best leaders and the best teams figure out very quickly if they made the right decision on personnel. And so I do tend to lean on that. If I think back to the angel deals that I've done, and I'll just give some examples, or give one example. So when I identified Athletic Brewing, for example, and invested very early with Bill Shuffold, quite frankly, I was an avid alcoholic beer drinker. I didn't understand why anybody would drink non-alcoholic beer. But in meeting with Bill and getting to know Bill, I said, this guy I am sure he is going to win. And obviously the story has been well publicized. It's been a fantastic deal. But the bet was on, again, not understanding why people would drink an NA beer. Made no sense to me, but I didn't want to bet against Bill.
Interesting. How involved do you get typically with your portfolio companies? I mean, you're leading deals, right?
Yep.
So are you in the trenches on this stuff?
I like to think we are. And I can say that with a fair level of confidence because we ask our founders a lot to advocate for us in certain scenarios, whether it's as we raise, they get called. If we are pursuing another deal, we connect them with existing founders, a new founder. And so we hear what they say about us. And yeah, we're I would say, very, very involved. Now, for example, in Fund 1, we have 21 companies. We all know the way the game is played. You can't you can't say 24/7, 365 to all 21 of those founders. Very quickly, you have to realize where you're going to budget your time and budget your day. So we pride ourselves on that. And again, we're a 3-person team, so we all bring different strengths to the scenario. We define it as sort of play into our strengths or zones of genius. So what I do is very different than what Mel does, is very different what Jordan does. But yes, we like to be value add.
And can you speak to the focus? You're primarily in the health area, correct?
Yeah, we also we define this as whole person health, which I think sometimes can be confusing because it gets a little bit close to sounding like holistic health, which it's not. But when you think about whole person health, this is really thinking about the 2 layers of care: upstream care, downstream care, preventative care versus sick care. I mean, healthcare and health in this country drives a significant portion of GDP. We are at a really interesting time when it comes to health. Our view is that people have fundamentally shifted their view on their own personal health. We sort of pin that to COVID, and coming out of COVID, our view is that folks had this moment. I mean, I speak for myself too. I mean, there was a moment where like, oh my God, this is it. They got us. We're all, this is how it ends. And then, fairly quickly we came out and said, oh, we're all going to survive. And you've seen this fundamental shift in people's habits, lifestyle, You've seen it also not just in those things, but you've seen it in the rise of influencers, creators, the likes of Andrew Huberman, Stacey Sims, Peter Attia. These folks have massive followings because their audience is this society that has fundamentally shifted, which is amazing for us. We started playing this game way before that happened. We're gonna play this game for as long as we're alive. And we don't think that shift goes away. We think people are along their health, and so we love the space. And it's only gonna get more exciting.
Yeah. Tell us about, I guess, why don't we do both? Tell us about your best deal, and then you don't have to name the deal that didn't work out so well, but maybe give us one of each.
Look, I mean, the easiest example to give that I think would resonate with the audience is Oura Ring. I mean, we were, sleep is a very big issue. You know, if you split this room in half the room is a terrible sleeper, maybe even more. The other half is a decent sleeper. But we were very early days with Oura. We invested in their $35 million round, their $125 million round. We invested in most of their rounds. We've been integrally involved in the company. Mel, my partner, they actually called us a little over 2 years ago and asked us if Mel, just to your point of adding value, they called us and asked if they could, quote unquote, borrow Mel for 3 days a week to be the interim chief marketing officer.
And can you just comment on Mel's background so people
So
know?
Mel, and I keep talking about Mel, but I feel like she's sitting right in front of me. She's right there. These lights. Mel and I actually go way back. Mel was at Nike for 20 years. I was a Nike athlete for many, many years. We were first, and here we sit in 2025, we were first introduced and first worked together in 2004 when Nike came to me as an athlete and as a cancer survivor and as the founder of Livestrong, and they came with this idea, and the idea was the yellow wristband. Everybody, myself and Mel included, thought it was the dumbest idea ever. They were gonna make 5 million yellow wristbands and sell them for $1 and try to help us raise $5 million. Long story short, it was actually not a dumb idea. We sold 85 million of those yellow wristbands. So Mel and I go back 20 plus years, and that was her time at Nike, and then she was looking for something else to do. We're actually reconnected through the CEO of a company called Decine, and Mel's sort of interview process of me included, we were both in the Bay Area, and we were texting back and forth, and I said, well, I'm gonna go see Willie tonight, Willie Nelson. If you'd like to come. She's like, well, that's pretty cool. So we go see Willie and hang out on the bus, and that was how we reconnected, and then decided to truly connect and build this firm.
Yeah.
We won't talk about what happened in the bus, but.
Okay, so what is, I guess, what do you think is next for the business? We've got this huge, like, I'm not in a conversation without AI coming up. I assume it's going to play.
I don't want to be in that conversation either.
Yeah.
But
but it's going to play a role. How big a part of the
of
deals
course it's
that you're
going to play a
looking
role.
at?
I mean, and I am not the person to speak in great detail of that, but I mean, it played a role in COVID. If you look at no matter where you sit on the vaccine debate, it played a role there.
Yeah.
Right? If we know previous to the COVID vaccine, again, no matter where you sit on this, the record time before that was 5 years. They had it in human beings in, I don't know, 52 days. That was all AI. AI is going to drastically affect health and health outcomes. I love that part of it. I mean, there's also a part of me that's like, wait a minute, I also like people. Like, what's going to happen to people? One thing that I think is our belief is that what people, as in going back to this piece of society, is we're going to get time back, right? So we are going to save time. We're going to save time in our day. What do we do with that time? Is that time with our family? Is that time to be spent on our health? Is that time to be used for experiential things? We are going to gain time. right? Which is great. And our preference is that people devote some of that time to their health and prolonging life and enhancing life going forward. So I think we have to talk about it. But it's, I'm going to let it play out. I think net we should, it's potentially a positive, but I just think we have to be careful.
So what's the long-term vision for Next Ventures? Where do you want to go with this thing?
Look, we get that question a lot. The unique thing about this team is that we're all athletes. There's only 3 of us, so the 3 of us are athletes, which means we're competitive, which means we grew up looking at results, looking at scoreboards, stopwatches, no matter how your sport was determined. That was competition. And so we pride ourselves on being competitive in the space. We have Fund 1 proved that we're in the game and we're competitive. We know what we're doing. We can access great deal flow. We can help founders. We can contribute. And so long as we continue to be competitive, we'll be doing this for a long time. I hate to think that there's ever a day that we all look around and say, well, we're not very competitive anymore. We should probably go do something else. I don't think that happens. But if it did, I personally wouldn't be able to play the game without competing. So, we're almost done raising our second fund, and we'll go and deploy that, and then be back out in market. But look, I love it. People ask me all the time, what's different about venture than what you had imagined 5 or 6 years ago? It's much harder. This is a full-time. My family can speak to this. I mean, this is better than anybody in the room. This is a full-time gig. This is not it could have been set up, I suppose, in a way where I hire amazing people like Mel and Jordan and say, let me know when I need to be there. This is a full-time job, and it's been tougher than I thought. But at the same time, I think when it's all said and done, it will be a lot more rewarding.
Yeah. Now, you also have a podcast that I know has done really well, and I think it's obviously a big focus around the tour in July. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So the podcast / content is important because without those 2 shows, and the cycling show is the one that is now the big show that's kind of the marquee show. There was another show before that had nothing to do with cycling. I refused to talk about cycling. I wanted to interview interesting people that I was interested in, but I didn't want to talk about cycling for all the various reasons. And then on a whim, I went and created a cycling show, and that show quickly blew up and rose to the top of the rankings, and that show is now the marquee show.
And what's the name?
That show, the cycling show, is called The Move, and the original show was called The Forward, which to me was really in recognition of a process that I was going through in my life where, everybody knows my story, so there was a point in time where I said, listen, I am choosing to move forward with my life, and I'm going to reimagine and reinvent, and I'm going to figure out a way to move forward and to support my family and do all the things that we do. So that was the original show, but yeah, the cycling show. And this show has now become one of the biggest shows in sports. Starting this summer, which it's hard to imagine that next month is already July and the tour starts July 5th. That show will now be live on NBC every day as soon as the stage finishes. So for just, as we sort of joke and like think about ourselves for a few dipshits that just sit around and talk about cycling, like it's all of a sudden become very successful. So, but without that, I don't think Next Ventures is a possibility, because that show, as it grew and the audience grew, then founders came back to me, advertisers came back, then the access turned on again, because the audience, the people had a place to migrate to, and so it's been a wild ride, so to speak.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, are you cool taking a few questions?
We can take a couple of questions, but I will just tell you that my 14-year-old daughter has insisted that she be allowed to ask a question.
Perfect. That's a great.
She asked, she said, "Are we taking questions at this thing?" I was like, "No, I don't think so." No. Her name is Olivia. She's sitting right up here. I'm terrified of this question.
Great. Go for it, Olivia.
She wants to go last. Now I'm really terrified. No, you get to go first.
You go.
Oh, God.
Well, with everything said, who's
The
your
mic's not
favorite?
on.
Hello? Okay.
There we go.
With everything said so far in the last, I don't know how many minutes, who's your favorite child?
And on purpose, I said, she told me she was going to ask a question. I was like, don't ask me the question ahead of time. I have 4 of my 5 children here, so I'm going to choose to not answer that question. But she did commandeer my phone one time and change her name in the contacts to say, Olivia, my favorite child. But it's a 5-way tie, Olivia.
All right.
That's pretty
Anyone who's not Lance's child have a question? My son is 2 seats away, and my 3 kids all do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's constant competition for who the favorite is. Don't tell your sister that. All right, we have someone in the back.
Okay, we had the first stage of the Dauphiné. So who's your pick for the tour? Remco, Pogačar, or Vingegaard?
Cycling question. Look, I gotta be honest. I don't watch a lot of cycling until the tour. However, I did read the article about what happened yesterday. Here's the reality is the sport of cycling has completely changed. Just for those who haven't followed cycling, this is a 100-plus-year-old sport. It's been played in a very traditional way for most of those 100 years. This current crop of riders has taken the traditional rule book and playbook and thrown it out. So anything can happen. You saw what happened yesterday on a day in a stage. It is the main stage race that leads up to the Tour de France. It's put on by the Tour de France. It's raced on a lot of the roads that the Tour will go through. Those early stages are typically set aside for the sprinters. These guys who are now the climbers and the overall contenders, they influence those stages too. Like, so what we saw on day 1, nobody ever would have predicted that. But a guy like Pogačar is, and I have been on the record with this, and I'll say it again, he is the greatest of all time. There's no doubt he is. What he is able to do on a bike, not just in the Tour, but all of the other events. Now, he may not have won as many tours as certain people. Doesn't matter. Pound for pound, at his age, he is already the greatest, which is pretty fun to watch. Now, you would say he has to be the favorite for the Tour. I would pick him as my favorite for the Tour. But you saw Vingegaard yesterday, who also agrees that we're going to throw out this playbook and rule book. He's going to play by the new set of rules. And so don't count him out. But it is one of those 2 guys. There is nobody else. So can Vingegaard, who has proven that he can come along and beat the guy that I just said is the GOAT, can he do it? Of course he can do it. Do I hope he does that or makes it exciting? Our job is to talk about a race that sometimes can be really boring. So it's better when these guys go at each other. So my fingers are crossed. But if I were a betting man, it's Pogačar, but I wouldn't count out Vingegaard.
Any other questions? There we go, right here in the middle.
Hi, what is the difference between the old rule book and the new rule book?
The old what?
Rule book. The old rule book versus the new rule book.
In cycling?
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of rule books in cycling that have been busted over the years, but the old traditional way of cycling, first of all, and this went all the way through my generation, you had riders who, all I cared about was the Tour de France. That's all that mattered. I'm an American guy. It's the only bike race that Americans know. I knew that that was the only race I was going to focus on. That's been true for most of the other previous winners, and no matter where they came from. But now these guys, they race, there's a few things, but they race throughout the year. They're highly competitive throughout the year. And one of the big shifts, I mean, I didn't win the Tour de France until I was 28 years old. And then when I won my final Tour de France, I was the oldest living, or the oldest Tour de France winner post-World War. Now they're very young. These riders are 19, 20, 21 years old. This was unheard of in our generation. You wouldn't have put a 20-year-old rider in a 3-week event. Now they not only put them in the event, they win the event. So it's drastically changed. And you have 200 riders on the road. They all want to be competitive. If you go back 50 years ago when Eddie Merckx was winning the Tour de France, you had 10 of those 200 that were competitive. The other 190 were just there in the way. They're all now very competitive. So it makes the race that much faster, that much more intense, and frankly, that much more dangerous. It's a different sport.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Lance. I've been a fan since the course dates way back in the old days.
Oh, wow.
When you think about all the races you've won and all the big wins, Alpe d'Huez among them, what's your favorite? What's the one that stands out to you?
Look, I mean, I think I was fortunate enough to win twice on Alpe d'Huez. Alpe d'Huez, for those who don't know cycling, that's like the Lambeau field of cycling. That is the most iconic. Well, there's 2 iconic climbs in France. One is the Mont Ventoux, one is Alpe d'Huez. I never won on Ventoux, so that would be one of my biggest regrets. I had the opportunity to win twice and didn't. And I was able to win twice on Alpe d'Huez, one which made famous because it was this duel with my main rival for most of my career, the big German Jan Ullrich. And I was able to beat him, and we had whatever was defined as the look early in the stage. And then the second time was I won in 2004 on Alpe d'Huez, which was a time trial. So I'm all alone on a mountain with 1 million spectators in the year of 2004, when this was we had just invaded Iraq. The geopolitical stuff was off the charts. I was warned to actually not ride the race alone on a mountain with 1 million spectators. It was State Department actually intervened and said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I said, "Hell yeah, I'm going to do that." I wasn't going to stop. So that was very special. Those 2 are very, very special. But I mean, there's so many special ones. I won Core States and for the Philly crowd.
Go
right,
Philly.
the Manayunk Wall. I won that in 1993. Won the national championship there as a young kid. And then a couple months after that, won the World Championships in the Stars and Stripes. So it was, there's a lot of special memories. Hard to beat Alpe d'Huez though. There is a mystique about that mountain and the amount of people. And if you've ever watched cycling, whereas Lambeau Field, there's stands, and normally the people stay in the stands and the players stay on the field. That doesn't happen in cycling. That you're basically riding through the stands. So it's interesting.
All right, so we only have about a minute left. I'm curious, do you still cycle? Do you do this? Is it still a part of your life, even in a casual way?
I do. We live in Austin, Texas, and most would know that Austin has has exploded, right? And so with explosion like that comes growth and development and traffic and construction. And so the riding, I moved to Austin in 1989 when I could ride right down Lamar Boulevard and stop in the middle if I wanted. You can't do things like that anymore. So my riding is more limited in Austin. We spend the summers in Colorado. I will ride my bike every day. The answer to your question is yes. It sounds corny and slightly hokey. I love riding my bike. I love riding my bike alone. And I get a lot, when I go ride alone, I feel like I get a lot done, obviously for my own health and wellness, but when I'm out there, especially alone, I'm able to think and just that it's therapy / church for me. And my family, especially my wife, can attest that, and probably could answer the question for you. Thank God he still rides his bike. Because if there are chunks of time where I don't, Ronnie, it's not a good thing. So yes, I do.
What is a typical, like how far are you going?
I don't ride far. I ride a couple hours.
What's a typical ride?
I don't. If I ride, I don't use anything. I don't wear a heart rate monitor. I don't have a power meter on my bike. I have a bike computer, so I will see the distance. I don't care much about distance. The one thing that I do care about is vertical gain. So if I've only got 90 minutes, 2 hours to go out and ride, I will try to climb as much as I can. So if I can go out in an hour and a half and climb 3,000 feet, which in Austin is hard to do. You have to hit a lot of little hills to do that. Then I'm satisfied. I wouldn't have much interest in riding 2 hours and not climbing, because climbing is obviously harder, equals suffering. I'm one of these people that prefers to suffer a little.
Yeah, I can tell. I would just be in first gear for 2 hours climbing 3,000 feet.
Well, that's, look, they've made a lot of progress on e-bikes.
Yeah, I need one of those.
I'm not kidding. I mean, I get a lot of questions about e-bikes, and people expect me to sort of poo-poo e-bikes. It's people on bikes. I love e-bikes, right? It could be whether you're commuting or whether you're a couple that like to ride but can't ride together anymore for whatever factor that is, and you're able to ride together. Like, I'm a big fan, so you and me can ride.
I really appreciate you saying that. I would need the e-bike. Ladies and gentlemen, Lance Armstrong.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.